So delighted and honored to have Commissioner of Economic Development, Mr. Scott Stern, here with us. And Mr. Stern is an amazing champion for economic development for the state of South Dakota. And working closely with Governor Dugard, he has done amazing things for the state, and he continues to come up with creative ideas and opportunities to attract and retain high-quality companies and startup companies in the state of South Dakota. And so today we are very delighted to have Commissioner and a distinguished alumnus of the business school, Mr. Scott Stern. And to introduce a commissioner, I have Margaret Kleiman here today. So Margaret.
We are so pleased to welcome Commissioner Scott Stern to our class today. In July 2016, Governor Dennis Dugard appointed Freeman native and University of South Dakota alum Scott Stern as Commissioner of the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Scott has almost 30 years of experience working for his family's oil company in Freeman, including 14 years as Vice President and General Manager. After spending 4 years in Arizona managing a division of Suncor Energy in the western U.S., Scott and his wife Stacy returned to South Dakota and now call Sioux Falls home. Scott and Stacy have 3 grown daughters and welcomed their first grandson in July of 2017. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Stern to our class today.
Well, thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Dean. Thank you. It really is fun to be here. I have to admit, I have not missed a Dakota Days since I left here in 1983. So that's how important this institution is to me. But it was a little bit humbling because my wife she drove down with me today, and I said, you know, it's been 35 years since I graduated, so you kind of do the math. I was a 1983 graduate. I said, I'm going to be speaking to a bunch of people that were not born when I graduated from this institution. So it's really fun to look at the institution through your eyes, and I'm going to give you a chance, and I'm going to share a few comments first, and then I really want to hear from you guys. But before we do that, it always helps me to get kind of a sense of where you're from. And Dean Binky showed me the map that Jennifer did, that we have kids from all over the world, or young people from all over the world. So first of all, by a show of hands, you know, naturally South Dakota. Who's from South Dakota? Give me a, okay, Vermont, all right. How about Nebraska? All right, a few less. How about Iowa? All right, the Iowa contingent sitting down here. How about Minnesota? Oh, good. Hey, you know what, Minnesota, I also want to thank you for sending so much business to South Dakota. You guys are our greatest. Your governor over there is one of our best salespeople. Now, only to be outdone by, how many are from here from California? Anybody from California? I'm going to hate to pick on you, but California sends a lot of business to South Dakota also. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit about that. Before I get started, to keep you on your toes, now this is Dakota Days week, and I'm sure, you know, Dr. Paul was here when I was in school, and they never gave us assignments during Dakota Days week. Now, none of the teachers here do they? I bet they do. But I'm going to give you one assignment. So I want you to be conscious of this. Maybe you've seen this before, but here's your assignment. I'm not a great artist. I'm a business school guy. But here's a grid. And assuming that this grid would be perfect, there's a bunch of squares up there. So I want you to be conscious of that, and we'll talk about it towards the end of the presentation or the discussion. So first of all, today what I'm going to spend a little time talking about is kind of 3 things. Is 1, the state, the economic condition of the state of South Dakota. And then 2, I really want to spend a little time talking, or a fair amount of time talking about USD and my career path, and how USD prepared me for my career. And then finally, maybe I'll share some lessons learned. Now, you can take that with a grain of salt. This is just an old mid-50s guy sharing some ideas with you. And what you choose to do with it in your career is entirely up to you. But I think that's one of the things that we have a responsibility to do. And no different than the teachers like Dr. Paul shared with me ideas and thoughts and challenged my thinking processes that kind of got me to where I am today. So, let's start with the economic state of South Dakota. Those of you that are going to school at this institution recognize that South Dakota is very proactive from a business perspective. We are strongly committed to support the businesses and the citizens of this state. And it's playing out. And in fact, the first quarter GDP, and I'm sure everybody knows what GDP is, right? You can raise your hand if you don't know what GDP is. Good answer. The state of South Dakota in the first quarter of 2018 was ranked third in the US with GDP growth. And in fact, in 2017, we broke a $50 billion record. We had never attained a $50 billion GDP in the state of South Dakota. So the state of South Dakota's business environment is growing. And you can be very proud of that because it's being done, it's being led by the relationships that we have with businesses and this institution that's helping lead some of that activity. Now, what does our agency do? We focus on the direct and primary jobs that are important to this state. Now, what we don't do is the retail world. We get asked that a lot of times. They said, you know, we go to a little town, or they say, we'd like to have a Taco John's here. That's not what our agency does. We believe that if you have enough primary and direct jobs that come into the community, that the retail will follow. So if you need a clothing store, if you need a McDonald's, if you need a Taco John's, that's not what the Governor's Office of Economic recruits. But one other misnomer is that we make the headlines when we recruit a business that comes from outside of the state into the state. That's what gets all the news. It's that 80-20 principle that really is what's going on in South Dakota, because about 80% of our growth is taking place with the businesses that are already here. So we spend a lot of time on retention and expansion and how we can support businesses in the state with their growth versus not always outside recruiting. And you know, we're successful at doing that, but the reality is we want to spend a lot of time here. So here's the performance scorecard in the last 3 years. So in 2016, our office was involved with about $610 million in capital expenditures in the state. And it was about 25 different projects. 610 million, 25 projects. That was 2016. 2017, ramped it up a little bit, 735 million and 40 projects. The first 6 months of 2018, 1.2 billion in 6 months. And we're already at 40 projects. So we can tell we got the flywheel spinning. We got the flywheel moving faster about South Dakota and what a great opportunity it is to have a business in South Dakota. Now the 4 areas that we focus on, you know, there's hundreds if not thousands of SIC codes. I don't think they even use that, so where they use it, it starts with an NSIC, they use a different acronym now. There's probably thousands of different industries that we could focus on, but the 4 that we do are 1, the bioscience industry, 2, the value-added ag industry, 3 is advanced manufacturing, and 4 is financial services. So when we did our market analysis, and we do, we said these are the areas that South Dakota can win in. I'll give you an example where we don't. We're not steel magnets. We don't have a lot of steel and iron ore production, so we can't do a lot of giant, heavy equipment construction here because we don't have low-cost steel here. And that's making a lot of news with the tariffs. Another one is, you know, we're not like North Dakota where we have a lot of oil available. So we're not going to be the oil guys. These are the 4 areas based upon the knowledge base that we have, the resources and commodities that we have. These are the areas that we play in that we can win in. So you'll see this is where we focus our time and effort. Okay? So before I move on, that's kind of what our agency does and where we're putting our focus in kind of the state of South Dakota. Okay? So before I move on, any questions about that? All right. So what have I been doing since 1983? Well, when I graduated from here, my father had started a business in 1976. I worked there on weekends and holidays, and in fact, I did the books. I played football. Those of you guys that understand, you play football on Friday nights, so at the time our business was so small, on Saturday mornings I would get up and do the books. And it would take me about 3 or 4 hours. And then during the nights I'd be driving a truck if somebody ran out of something. I would deliver stuff. So we were a small company. I came back to that business in 1983. We did about $500,000 in sales and had 6 employees. 20-some years later, the company now had 80 employees and we were doing just short of $80 million. And we were in 5 states. So the business grew. I started on my MBA. And one of the classes, I don't know if they still have it or not, it's called Family Business Dynamics. Do they still have that, Dean Vinke? Still have Family Business Dynamics as part of the curriculum?
Yes.
Okay. So I came down and took that class and a couple other classes, started working on my MBA. Had a life-changing moment. Unfortunately, couldn't continue that. But those of you that follow family businesses, you know that there's some things that need to be done in a family business. And it's called succession planning. Well, my father, great guy, but he was going to live forever. He didn't need to pass on the business because he was going to live forever. And I always tell people that, until you face some tragic things in your life, the business is your identity in many cases. And they're serial entrepreneurs. Those of you that probably have studied that, that's true. That business is them. So my dad said he thought he was going to live forever, didn't have to do the succession planning. But he was getting up there in age, and I was at a point where I needed to make a career decision, because what was I going to do? Because the challenge I had was this. If my mom and dad would have got killed in a car accident, I would have had to sell half the business just to pay the tax. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. So, input another issue. My wife's parents had some health-related issues, and they were in Arizona. So it was 2012. My youngest daughter was coming down here to USD. We were empty nesters. And we decided to go take care of her parents. They lived in Yuma, Arizona. So I took a change, or made a career change and went to work for a company called Suncor Energy. But let me start with, that was a life-changing moment. But I was prepared by what took place here. Because I didn't realize the impact that this education had on me from this business school until I get into the corporate world, because I was functioning in this family business, in this environment. But now you throw me into a different pond, and I saw firsthand how impactful this education was. I remember teachers. In fact, I didn't want to admit to Dr. Powell what I got in his COBOL class. But I remember going as a sophomore, going into Dr. McCabe's Econ 203 class. He had it over in the auditorium, and I remember sitting down in a big room like this, and he said, look to the left, look to the right, because at least one of each of those 3 are not going to be in this class at the end of the year. He was right about that. Also had a room about this size, and you sat in that same spot all the time because he took attendance. And then when they did the test, he did a test at night, periodically, and the tests were between 20 and 30 pages long. And we took the test at 6 o'clock. The next morning when we had Econ 203, he presented the test to us. And I don't know how many hundreds of kids were in the class. So I learned a work ethic from him. And I learned how to perform under sometimes very stressful environments. But more importantly, I didn't realize how valuable that education was until I got to go out, a chance to be exposed to the rest of the world. And so then I got exposed when I was out when I worked for Suncor, I was in the same room with Georgetown grads, Syracuse MBAs, Stanford MBAs. Guess what? They're no smarter than us South Dakotans. Not one bit. And I think as South Dakotans, that's one of the things that we have to make sure is that, we're very humble. We're very modest in this state. We're very modest in this Midwest. We have a tendency to kind of look down at our shoes a little bit once in a while. But what I want to share with you is with this education that you're going to get here, is you can look anybody right in the eye and win the battles in the business world with this education. I didn't appreciate it, and I truly didn't. The leadership that we had at that business school, the engagement, the passion that they shared with us, I didn't appreciate at the time. I mean, I wish I could go back to school now, because I would learn so much more from these people. So if I give you one challenge, that challenge is learn as much as you can from these professors because they care. Also, what I'm seeing is a significant change, which is really positive, is this private-public partnership that's taking place at USD with the business world. That creates an opportunity to learn directly on things that are taking place right now, and allows you to develop relationships with businesses that you can leverage when you graduate from here at a later time. So please use that. And I can't stress enough how important that is to continue to learn. So, did the Suncor thing, so family business, Suncor thing, did that for 4 years. I got to tell you a quick story. Talk about taking a country boy out and putting him on the West Coast. While I lived in Arizona, I had responsibility for the 9 states in the West. At the time I was still living in South Dakota when I made my first trip to Seattle. Now, our idea of traffic in Freeman, South Dakota is a little different than traffic in Seattle. When I got to the corner in Freeman and there was somebody coming, I was a little bit disenchanted because I had to wait for traffic. Going to Seattle is something different. So you send this country boy out to Seattle on his first visit to the corporate world. And, 5 lanes on either side. Got this rental car, I know where I'm going. I get up early in the morning, I'm going to make my first appointment to see a potential client. And the traffic is really backed up in the 4 lanes to the right. Well, there's not all kinds of space. There's nobody driving on the left-hand side. So I get out on the left-hand side and I just tool down the road and I can't figure out why everybody's trying to all snarled up. I had never been on an HOV lane in my life. High occupancy vehicle. What does that require? You got to have at least 2 people in there. Guess what? It is a $549 fine. Fortunately, I didn't get hit with that fine, but the reality is that's when you learn pretty quickly about how to adapt in this world. And then we live in kind of this bubble in South Dakota. But the fact is there's a big world out there that I thought, my gosh, when I was relatively successful in South Dakota, and we had this company that did $80 million in this state that only had 800,000 people. Put me in an area where they have millions. California has 35 million people. I felt like a mosquito in a news collar. I did not know where to start because there was so much opportunity. So, worked at Suncor for 4 years. I didn't know anything different. Didn't realize, because all of that, it was a Canadian company, all of our product came from Toronto. Now you can imagine to ship product from Toronto to Los Angeles, it's kind of expensive, right? That territory I took over out of the 13 regions that we had never been better than 10. Never been better than 10 out of 13. I didn't know any better. My team didn't know any better. I hired new people, changed the culture, said we can win. Let's find the places that we can win. And guess what? The second year we were there, we took it to 3rd. And you know why? We looked beyond the obvious. We said, where can we win? Where can we sub-segment? Because our predecessors, they drove by stuff that we paid attention to. But we also treated people differently. So, did that for 4 years. I'm sitting at my desk in May of 2016. My phone rings, and it comes up, unknown caller. Now, by a raise of hands, how many people answer a phone and it says unknown caller? 1 or 2. Most don't, because it's usually some sort of telemarketer, but curiosity must have killed the cat that day, because I answered the phone. And it was an assistant that worked for the Governor Dugard. And she said, Scott, she said, let me introduce myself. Your name's been put forward as a potential candidate to assume this responsibility as the Commissioner of the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Are you interested? Well, one, when you mention South Dakota, I'm already interested. And I knew a little bit about what that office did. And I said, yeah, I'm interested. So you put the resume together, go through the vetting process, have an initial phone interview, then you have an interview with the Board of Economic Development. Made it through that, then had to fly back and actually met with Governor Dugard. Nervous. Nervous. Went through that process. It was on a Monday, July 11th. He said, Scott, I'll call you on Wednesday and let you know if you got the job. So on Wednesday, I'm in my office, I'm on another call, and the phone rings. Comes across as Governor Dugard. I didn't take his call right away. I had to admit that to him here just a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact. Listened to his voicemail. I said, here's my window of time if you could call me back. But he didn't tell me if I got the job. So I walked out and I sat down with my wife and I said, what am I going to do? And as any wife will counsel those of you when you get married, she said, look at me and she said, you'll figure it out. She said, you will know. I did not know what I was going to do. And I didn't know if I was even going to get the job. I called the governor back and he offered me the position. And at that point in time, it was like a wave came over me. I knew what I wanted to do. And that was come back and work for him. But most importantly, work for the people of this great state. Because I was gone for 4 years, and I joke kiddingly at times that being gone from South Dakota gave me a chance to see how great South Dakota is. And that 4 years that I was away, I tell people I got a Bachelor of Science in South Dakota Appreciation. Because I saw firsthand now, I really lived how great this state was and the people were in this state. But I was anxious about it. I had never been a public servant. Aside from being on the Freeman City Council, guess what? I had never been in government. I was nervous. I was very anxious about it, but I knew that if I didn't do this, I would regret it. Because the safe space would have been just to stay and do what I was doing. I got paid well. I joked that many times I was a TT boy. Anybody ever heard that term? TT boy, you work Tuesday through Thursday, 10 to 2. And that's kind of what I did, because I flew around to these 9 states. I'd leave Monday night or Tuesday morning, and I'd come home Wednesday night or Thursday. Didn't mean I didn't have a lot of paperwork and reports and stuff, but that was kind of my life. So I came back to do this. And I have not regretted it one bit. In fact, I have quipped also, I said, at the time I had a house that I owned in Arizona, bought a house in Sioux Falls, that this job has been so much fun. If I didn't have 2 mortgages, I'd have done it for free. Because you can't, it's so exciting to get up every day and brag about, and I mean brag, about the people of this state and this institution and the people that live here. So I'm honored to be doing that, I truly am. And thank you guys all for giving me that opportunity. So that kind of walks me through my career path. Now, what's this mid-50s guy going to tell you about lessons learned? Now, there's some interesting things that I have picked up. Whether you choose to use them or not is entirely up to you. But I think it's my social and my educational responsibility to kind of share kind of a few of those thoughts. So I want to walk you through 4 or 5 things. So number 1 is this: never stop learning. Never stop learning. You have to have a passion for learning, but how you can apply that education, even in a formal or informal way, is what will make you different and separate you from your competitors and separate you from everybody else in the field. Even if you get a business degree here, there's nothing wrong with getting an engineering degree. Nothing wrong with getting a chemistry degree. Nothing wrong with going on and getting your MBA, because that will separate. The more you learn, the more analytics that you can apply to your position, the opportunity, the better skills that you'll add to that organization that you belong to. So never stop learning. In fact, I'll bore you with a bunch of stuff, or one thing. How many have heard of the Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers? Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers. I can't believe all the hands don't go up. I'm a member of that society. I am certified in that society. In fact, when I went through it, it was a very intensive testing process. I was number 218 in the world. And still, there's only about 500 of us. And this organization's been around for about 40 years. So I can bore you to death on how lithium hydroxystearate outperforms calcium carbonate grease applications. Or I can talk about hydrodynamic fluid lubrication. All kinds of boring things of that nature, but guess what it did? It separated me from my competition. Because now I just didn't have business acumen that I could bring to the relationship. I could bring some science. And that made me different. So never stop learning. Second one is teamwork. I saw a gentleman walk through here with a basketball shirt on, and those of you that participate in sports, you know how important teamwork is. But I'll go one step further. The teamwork that you develop and the team capability that you develop as a young person will be beneficial to you later in life. Anybody know who Stacey King is? Not a raise of hands. Not surprised. How about Michael Jordan? Okay. And I'll give you a pass on this because this is before you were born. So this is one of my favorite teamwork stories. In 1990, the Chicago Bulls were playing the Cleveland Cavaliers. And it was a 5-game series. Third game of the series, it's neck and neck, tied, going into the finals of the final seconds of the game. Michael Jordan has scored an NBA record of 69 points in one game. The guy could not miss. Everything that he threw up went in. Stacey King, his teammate, 6'11" power forward from Oklahoma, had played 17 minutes of that entire game. He shot 4 times, made 0. Seconds left on the clock, Stacey King gets fouled. 2-shot foul, he goes to the line. Referee hands on the basketball. Stacey shoots, misses. Now, taking a final's tough, right? Can you imagine? You want to win this game. Thousands of fans in the building, millions of people watching on TV. The pressure's on, referee hands on the ball. Stacey shoots and makes it. The Bulls win by 1 point. So after the game, the reporters were all in talking to Michael Jordan. It's like, you were on fire. How did it feel? How'd you prepare? And Michael's answering the questions. Finally, a reporter walked over to Stacey King and said, Stacey, how do you feel about the game? Stacey looked at the reporter, he says, I will never forget how Michael Jordan and I combined for 70 points to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. The point is this, that 1 point is what made the difference. Yeah, granted, Michael Jordan poured them in, but it takes a team to push it over the top. When I was here, there was a, probably Dr. Rogers, I can't remember for sure, but talked about Peter Drucker. And Peter was the father of modern management. I think he actually was credited for creating the management by objective theory. But he had a statement that really always stuck with me. And it was, focus on the contribution that you can make. You never know when your 1 point is what pushes something over the top and you win as a team. I know you guys aren't physics majors, but if I asked you, what is water at 211 degrees? Anybody know? It's just really hot water, right? But what happens if we add 1 degree to that water? It's now 212, it boils, right? And when it boils, we can create steam, we can power locomotives, we can power engines, we can power generators to make electricity. Just that 1 degree. So when I talk about teamwork, sometimes you guys may just be that 1 degree, but that's the critical piece. And sometimes you may be the Michael Jordan. Regardless, you're still going to need a team to be successful. I will tell you, every position that I've been in, private sector, public sector, corporate sector, there's been a team commitment to make things work. So teamwork is important. Make sure I get that. So ask questions. I think another indelible characteristic of Midwestern values is we're curious. We like to, we don't have a lot of people around here, so when we meet somebody new, we ask questions about them. And I didn't realize it was my habit until one of the friends of mine that I developed down in Phoenix His name is Brian Bingold. In fact, he was an engineer that works for Intel that manages the autonomous technology for autonomous cars. Became a great friend and is to this day, but one of the passions that we had, we play a little golf once in a while. And I never realized that I did until Brian pointed it out one day. So many times you go as a twosome, those of you that play golf, you know, they hook you up with somebody else and might have a foursome. Well, we got these other two people. To me, that's fresh meat to learn something. So I would ask them questions like, where are you from? What do you do? How do you do it? What do you like? What don't you like? And Brian was amazed with that. And he said, Scott, I've never seen anybody do that. I said, and it's not just me, but I think that's part of our culture. But when you ask questions, you show a sincere commitment in them. And it's interesting how well and how much you can learn. I said that's why God gave us 2 eyes and, or 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we talk. And I'm breaking that rule right now. But the important thing is we can learn and ask questions. And when we do that, we endear ourselves to those people, and we have an opportunity to help and support them. Which takes me to my 4th topic on lesson learned. When I was 26 years old, I sat in a room kind of like this, maybe a little bit bigger in Sioux Falls. There was a guy that presented by the name of Zig Ziglar. And Zig was an author, motivational speaker, very passionate, very energetic. And there was something that stuck with Zig that rang true with me. And Zig said, in order for you to get what you want, you have to help enough other people get what they want. Now that seems kind of selfish, isn't it? But he didn't mean that in that capacity. Is you have to look past what their needs are and how you can support them. And so let me give you kind of a visual. So in the business world, if you have a client, in the B2B world, let's do it that way, they probably have multiple clients. If you're their supplier or vendor right here, you don't take into consideration, you don't just consider what this guy's need is, because this person needs these clients. So what you have to do is think about how can I support these people through this channel of distribution. If you understand this, in order for you to get what you want, you help this guy get what he wants. I thought this played out a little farther as later in my career. So I always looked at it, because I was typically in the B2B world working through channels of distribution. If I could find ways to help my client be more successful, they kept me around. Then I read a book here just a few years ago by a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek. And it was Start With Why. And this all made sense. Why do we do what we do? And he actually has a visual that he uses. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. Why, how, and what. And he's famous for saying is people don't buy what you do or how you do it, they buy why you do it. You probably have been exposed or you met somebody at one point in time and they said something or made you feel a certain way. You may not remember exactly what they said, but you never forget how somebody makes you feel. And that is what Simon was